Ready to dive into the future of education. We're going to be talking about how the digital age is changing, well, everything, especially the role of the teacher.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, sometimes it feels like classrooms are stuck in the past.
Totally. So to help us break down what needs to change and how we can get there, we're going to be looking at some seriously cool research.
Including some really insightful observations from Lady ValderramaC's. She's a doctoral student who's really deep in this topic.
And she's got some interesting things to say about how the traditional classroom model, the one we're all familiar with, might not be cutting it anymore.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Like, there are all these articles out there saying the traditional classroom is dead, which, I mean, may be a little dramatic, but it does make you wonder, what is it about that old model that's holding us back?
Okay, so let's unpack that a little. When you picture a traditional classroom in your mind, what do you see?
Rows of desks, all facing the teacher, textbooks open. It's like a museum exhibit or something.
And Lady ValderramaC's makes a really interesting point about that. It's not just about how it looks, it's about what that setup says about how we view teaching. It's like the teacher is the sage on the stage, the one with all the knowledge.
Yeah, and it's their job to just kind of, I don't know, impart that knowledge to the students. But the thing is, things have changed.
Big time. I mean, hello, it's the digital age. We've got information at our fingertips 24/7.
Exactly. And that's what Andreas Schleicher, who's a really influential voice in education, talks about. He says, Google knows everything. So the question is, what's the point of education if it's just about memorizing facts that you can literally Google in a second?
It's like, what are we actually trying to teach kids if not just information? And how do we prepare them to succeed in a world that's changing so quickly?
And that is the million-dollar question.
It seems like there's always some new education buzzword popping up, right?
Yeah.
Like, what even personalized learning or a flipped classroom?
Well, the cool thing is a lot of these new ideas are all about getting students more engaged and making what they're learning feel relevant to their lives, which honestly isn't always the case with traditional teaching.
Right. Like I remember some classes in high school, I was like, when am I ever going to use this in real life?
Exactly.
I
So
can't.
take personalized learning, for example.
Yeah.
It's basically the opposite of everyone learning at the same pace and in the same way.
Okay, I like the sound of that already. So is that where technology comes in, like tailoring the material and the pace to each student?
Yeah, exactly. It's recognizing that everyone learns differently. Some people are visual learners, some are more hands-on, and tech can help us personalize those experiences.
That makes so much sense, especially for students who might feel like they're struggling to keep up, or maybe they're actually ahead, but they're stuck with the pace of the whole class.
Exactly. And then there's flipped classrooms, which is another interesting concept.
I'll be honest, when I first heard about flipped classrooms, I thought, isn't that just watching a recording of a lecture at home? Like, how is that revolutionary?
You're not wrong to be a little skeptical. It does sound kind of underwhelming if you just think about it as watching videos for homework.
Yeah.
But the real difference is what happens after that. Because if you think about it, the traditional model uses up all that precious class time for, basically passive listening.
True. And then everyone gets home and they're like, wait, what did we even learn today? And also, how do I do this homework?
Exactly. But with the flipped classroom, that class time opens up. It becomes a place for actually doing things, for having discussions, working on projects.
Okay, so that's where the flipped part comes in. Instead of just passively listening to a lecture during class, you're doing the active learning part together. That makes more sense.
Exactly. And this is where we see project-based learning, or PBL, coming in, which Lady ValderramaC's talks about a lot.
I've heard of PBL, but to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on what it actually looks like in the classroom.
Basically, it's all about getting students to really apply what they're learning to solve real-world problems. And often it's done collaboratively, which is another key skill for, pretty much any job you'll have as an adult.
So instead of just memorizing facts, they're actually using those facts to, do something.
Precisely. Like, imagine, instead of just reading about climate change, students could get to design a project to make their school more sustainable.
That's such a good example, because it's not just theoretical anymore. They're actually seeing how the concepts they're learning about can be used in the real world.
Right. And there's actually a really fascinating study Lady ValderramaC's mentions, where they followed students who had done PBL years later. And what they found was that these students weren't just better problem solvers. They were more likely to take initiative, be creative, and persevere even when things got tough.
Oh, wow. So it's like those skills they learned during PBL, they stuck with them, even years later.
Totally.
Yeah.
And those are the skills that employers are looking for,
Right.
being able to solve problems, to think outside the box, to be resilient.
That's huge. It's not just about the lesson itself, it's about building those fundamental skills that will help them no matter what they end up doing in life. So we've talked about moving away from that traditional sage on the stage model and embracing all these cool new tools and approaches, but it makes you wonder, like, what does it even mean to be a teacher in this digital age?
Yeah, that's a big one. And it's something Lady ValderramaC's really digs into in her work. It's like, being a teacher now, it's not about being a walking encyclopedia anymore.
Which, let's be real, no one can compete with Google anyway.
Exactly. It's more about being like a guide, a facilitator, someone who helps students navigate this crazy ocean of information that's out there.
I love that. A guide. But being a good guide in the digital age, that takes a whole different set of skills, right?
For sure. I mean, digital literacy is a big one, obviously, but it's more than just knowing how to, USC technology.
Right. It's not enough to just hand a kid an iPad and be like, go learn something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Teachers need to be able to figure out, okay, is this app actually effective? Is this website biased? They need to understand the limitations of technology too, not just the possibilities.
Oh, totally. And it's about being able to use tech in a way that creates really meaningful learning experiences, not just adding more screen time for the sake of it.
It's like, think about a museum curator. They don't just throw a bunch of stuff in a room and be like, here's some history. They carefully choose what to display and how to arrange it. They create a narrative.
That's such a good point. And speaking of curation, that's another super important skill for teachers now. Because students have access to so much information, it can be overwhelming.
Absolutely. So teachers can help them filter through all that noise.
Like, be the fact checkers, the BS detectors. Teach them how to evaluate sources and think critically about what they're reading online.
Exactly. And then on the more, flashy side of things, there's the whole world of immersive technology, like VR and AR.
Which is so cool. But I can also see how that might seem a little intimidating for some teachers. Like, how do you even begin to incorporate that stuff?
Totally. But the potential is huge.
Yeah.
Imagine using VR to take your students on a field trip to ancient Rome, or using AR to make a science experiment actually come to life in the classroom.
Okay, that's seriously cool. And I know a lot of schools are starting to get access to this technology, which is exciting.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to the bigger point here, which is that education is changing, and it's going to continue to change.
It's not just about adding a few iPads to the classroom. It's about rethinking the whole learning experience from the ground up.
100%. And that means that teachers, they need to be adaptable. They need to be curious. They need to keep learning and growing right alongside their students.
That's so true. It's not about having all the answers anymore. It's about being open to new possibilities and helping your students do the same.
And most importantly, making sure our students have the skills they need, not just for the jobs that exist today, but for whatever amazing opportunities might exist 10, 20 years down the line.
Exactly. Because who even knows what the world's going to look like then? But if we can equip students with those fundamental skills, creativity, problem solving, resilience, the ability to learn and adapt, they're going to be ready for anything.
And that's what it's all about, giving them the tools they need to create their own futures, whatever those futures might hold.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to all you educators out there, keep exploring, keep innovating, and keep inspiring the next generation of thinkers and doers. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.